Good afternoon, and thank everybody for joining us today on the Charter School Legislative Roundup. As I said, my name is Michael O'Brien, and I'm going to talk a little bit about charter school legislation in general, and then we can go into some specifics that are happening in the states right now. How many bills are there associated with charter schools? Well, if you think about it, and remember that charter schools are public schools. Remember that charter schools maintain buildings and grounds. Remember that charter schools nurture, protect, and educate children. And that charter schools get public funds. That all adds up to a lot of state legislation. There are over 2,000 bills nationally that mention the words charter schools. Again, a lot of them are general education bills, but some of there's a number of bills out there that are charter school specific. And anyone interested in charter school advocacy will have an interest in not only the general education ones, but the especially an interest in the charter school specific bills. How do you find them? Well, you can go to state legislative site of all 50 states and do searches for charter schools, or you can try a tool like Bill Track 50, and we're going to do a little demonstration of Bill Track 50. This is a stakeholder page which allows anybody interested in charter school legislation to look at the bills that are out there. I've narrowed it down a little bit, so I have over 12,039 bills in this bill sheet, which is an immense number, difficult to go through. But that's why we use tools like Bill Track 50. I'm going to filter by state, and we can see states like Alabama. They have one bill about charter schools. Or you can see New Jersey, which has over 91 bills that talk about charter schools. Colorado, where a couple of the attendees have over 17. And why do you use a tool like Bill Track 50? Well, a lot of times advocates will look at either the national advocacy site. This is the National Alliance for Charter Schools, and you can go to their site, and a lot of times advocacy groups will talk about legislation that impacts their issues. Unfortunately, not only does the National Alliance for Charter Schools, the Center for Education Reform, which is a big charter school advocacy group, and what's the last one? And the National Association of Charter School Authorizers, all of these very strong advocates for charter schools in the states, none of them talk about specific state legislation on their sites. So while traditionally an advocate would go to these sites to find them, for charter schools, it's a particularly difficult issue to find. Even if you go to specific states, here's Colorado State Advocacy Network, the Charter Advocacy Network. They have a great grassroots page, a lot of information on it. Great in the sense that there is a lot of information on it. They have a lot of information on charter schools in general. A great advocacy toolkit that you can download and take a look at. But when it comes down to it, they don't talk about state legislation. We saw here 17 pieces of legislation, including the Institute Charter School Assistance Fund, which, if we take a look at the summary under current law, So the Charter School Institute withholds 1% of money due to institute charter schools. So this is talking about funding for charter schools, something that I would think any charter school advocate would be interested in. No mention of it on their advocacy site. And one thing that I like about Bill Track 50 um, is the amount of information that you can get from it. Not only do you get the bill information, you can get the legislator information. So you can send an email or call the legislator and talk to his staff about what this bill does, why he's sponsoring it, why you support or oppose it. You have the full text of the bill, including changes to the law. You have the action history. You can see this particular bill is in House Committee on Education uh, after having passed the Senate. So it's actually moving. I guess good news if you're an advocacy charter school advocate. You can see the vote history uh, down to the committee votes and associated documents. So it's got a lot of associated documents. Everything that you could find on the state legislative site, you can find here. So whether you're looking just in Colorado and there are 17 bills, or you're interested in New Jersey and there are 91 bills, or if you have to go through the 1,200 or so uh, bills that I have in my bill sheet, this is a great tool to help do that. You can drill down a little deeper right in this bill sheet. You can talk about funding, which cuts it down to 139. You talk about application, cuts it down to 87. These are just typical no wait list bills this time. Just typical charter school language. You can drill down and see a lot of different information out there. I'd love to see if anybody has any specific questions on charter schools specifically, and see if my co-panelist Karen Suhaka has anything to add.
Hi, Michael. Hopefully you can all hear me. I am curious about what the trends are. What are you seeing more of this year? Is there more funding or less funding? And what seems to be the item most of interest kind of across the country? Or is that different state by state?
I mean, it varies state by state, but certainly I would say the national focus is on charter school model legislation, and you can find the model legislation. Uh, all of the big national advocacy sites have it, but kind of the push is to get your state.
Yeah, what's the gist of the model legislation?
Let me pull up this piece here. Oops. I had the tab and I think I X'd it out. Here we go. Oh, that's not. I'm sorry. Just bear with me for a second here. Why am I not finding it? Of course, I'm not finding it now. All right, this map makes noise, but it's pretty good. You can see You can see pretty easily. States ranked 1 through 8 are generally considered the best. So they go blue, dark green, light green, yellow, and then you have the bottom of the barrel here. Model legislation typically is about will include information on state oversight, ease of creating charter schools, um, uh, laws on converting traditional schools into charter schools, whether that be internal by administration or rules allowing parents of failing schools to kind of take over and convert traditional schools to charter schools. But some the oh god that noise. The big push has been on moving these states that are in the yellow and the brownish yellow into green and blue states. There was a very strong push in Arkansas to improve their charter school laws this year. Former Governor Jeb Bush, who is uh, a big advocate in this and helped found one of um, the Center for Education Reforms, one of the big advocacy groups, uh, traveled several times to Arkansas. And there's a little story about it, and that bill is still moving. Arkansas is AR. It's
Can you make
still.
available to all of us the
I
links you're
can.
sharing in a summary?
I
That would
can.
be good. So you showed us several groups that are advocates of moving legislation forward. Traditionally, who is opposing this sort of legislation, and what is the heart of their argument to not support charter schools?
The traditional groups that are opposing school board charter schools moving forward are school boards. The National Association of School Boards has certainly been a traditional opponent of charter schools. Teacher unions, uh, depending on the state, um, can be strongly opposed. In Virginia, I've worked with some charter schools where the unions have been not only supportive of the charter schools, but it was union members that helped create or put forth some of the proposals. Um, and in
So
Virginia,
what's the difference there? Is that a state culture thing, or is that just the nature of the legislation?
it's the nature of the legislation. So the charter schools in Virginia still are the teachers are still employed technically by the school district, which is not the traditional model. But certainly, if they're employed by the district, it means they're still going to be union members, um, which I think kind of helps foster a spirit of cooperation. Um, yeah, charter school advocates will argue that it's not ideal, um, but every state's going to be different, and if it's what works in your state, then you make it work. So certainly school boards, and in Virginia, the school board has opposed I think every single proposed charter school, and it's primarily funding and control issues. So anytime you're asking a group to give up funding and control over something that they're used to receiving funds for and having control over, they're generally going to be opposed. It's a general comment on the situation. It doesn't always happen, but in terms of opponents of charter schools, certainly the teachers unions, but especially the school boards, have been especially opposed.
Now, charter schools have been in the news a lot lately. Certainly, we've been hearing about them for the last year or so. At least I've heard more about it lately. Does this come and go, or is this a new trend? And are we going to be hearing more about it in the near future or less?
I think we're going to be hearing more about it in the future for a number of reasons. Charter schools are really, you know, 15 years old in essence, legislatively, starting in Minnesota and Wisconsin. Um, you know, even, so they're still a very new entity. They're still very young. You know, a number of states' charter school laws are less than 5 years old. So
Are there any states that don't allow charter schools?
there are Montana,
Oh,
uh,
I see. Okay.
North Dakota, South Dakota, uh, Nebraska, Mississippi, Alabama. We saw that the one bill in Alabama was to allow charter schools to exist. So they are working on it. It is a big issue. Anywhere where you're having problem schools, and every state has failing schools, no matter how good they are. Even, you know, even here in Virginia, where the governor likes to say we have some of the best schools in the country, you know, we still have failing schools. Not every school is going to be a great school, and even your best districts have schools that are top performing, and schools that are failing, and your worst districts also have schools that are, you know, quality performers. um, but to provide opportunities to improve those schools, or to provide different avenues for students to go through schools, whether it's uh, vouchers or parent takeover or charter schools. You know, of all of the school choice options, you know, I think charter schools is probably among the least controversial. So it's the easiest to deal with, because you're talking about, you know, keeping schools public, so you're keeping that public uh, school system that has been an important piece of American and state government for so long. You know, you're not shifting money to either religious or parochial schools, or private schools that, you know, charge significant tuition to a number of uh, to a number of their students. You know, it's not it's you know, it's of all the school choice options, it's among the least controversial. So it's often the first place that parents and school advocates and education advocates turn to start fixing school districts.
Can we switch back to the stakeholder page? I'm curious to see if there's any legislation in South Dakota.
Provide for the
Okay,
creation of a
so probably most of those, yeah, let's see what
right.
how's it doing? What's the action history?
Let's see. So it was scheduled for a hearing in February. Education tabled, which I'd have to go into the associated documents, but most likely it means the vote was to table, which means probably not happening this session, which means probably another 2 years for charter schools in South Dakota.
Got it. Okay, thank you for pulling that one up. I'll let you take questions from other people. I don't mean to monopolize the entire conversation.
I've unmuted those of you who had been muted the rest of the session. If you want to, if you have any questions, feel free to speak up, or I believe you can type them somewhere. I can't because I'm the leader, but
Hi, Michael. This is Will. Can you hear me?
yes,
If I type the URL on that stakeholder page into my own browser, will I be able to pull up that page?
you will.
Excellent. I'm going to do that now.
And I will send an email of all the different links that I kind of breezed throughout the session, and a few more, you know, to make it. I can send out the anybody that I talked about. I can send their information as well, uh, to give everybody an unbiased view of charter school legislation.
And that's a good question, Will. Thank you for that. I will add this link to the stakeholder page to the blog post about charter about the webinars, so that it will be there too. So you can just click on it because that's a lot to type to get exactly right. So we'll add a link, and that should be live by this afternoon.
Thank you. Well, if that's all we have, this is Michael O'Brien posing as on your list. I'm Karen Tuhaka, organizer presenter, as opposed to Karen Tuhaka panelist. But thank you, Karen, for your great questions, and thank you, Will, for your question. And look forward to other legislative roundups that Bill Track 50 is having. If you have any questions, my information, Michael O'Brien, michael@legisnation.com, or you can reach me 703-789-6447. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Michael, for a wonderful session. And thanks to all the attendees.